So hello everybody, welcome to the webinar on how to use the Cultural Blueprinting Toolkit and the Cultural Blueprinting Toolkit Workbook. I will be in this webinar and we're going to take only about 30 minutes and then your questions will open up. And I will be doing a quick review. Some of you will have heard some of the things I'm going to cover on the invisible architecture of the organization. And then specifically how to use some of the most practical, most important tools in the workbook and in the webinars. So let's get started. Today, it's October 12th. We're going to be talking about the invisible architecture of your organization. And I do want to point out that in the slides I'll be sharing, there are several live links that can take you to a web page related typically to the culture assessment of your organization. I will be sending out a copy of these slides to everybody on the call, and I will also include in that these links so that you can go right to those links. And I want to point out what you already know, and that is there is an invisible barrier on the performance potential of your organization. And that barrier is the attitudes, the behaviors, the self-talk, the self-image, the self-esteem of the people who work there. And that's what we really get at with invisible architecture. And here's the bad news. Almost everybody who studies employee engagement, Gallup, Avatar, Modern Survey, our surveys at Values Coach, finds pretty much the same bell curve. On average, about 25% of people are engaged in the organization. They show up every day with their hard hat and their lunch pail, ready to go to work and give it their best. 60% of people are not engaged. It's just a job. And that doesn't mean they're doing a bad job necessarily, but all they're doing is the job. And at quitting time, they're out of there. And on average, about 15% of people are aggressively disengaged. They bring their toxic worst self to work every day. Now, there is obviously a huge range. There are organizations, we've worked with some of them, where everybody's engaged, from housekeeper to CEO and everywhere in between. And there are organizations, and we've worked with a few of these, where it seems like nobody's engaged. The housekeepers show up and they whine and complain all day, and the CEO sits in his or her office waiting for the headhunter to call with a better job somewhere else. So the question is, where does your organization fall on this bell curve? And within your organization, are there consistent variations? Do you see some departments, some units where people are really engaged and they show up every day ready to work hard and do a good job and they're excited about what they do? And around the corner, there's another department, another unit where nobody's engaged and they whine and complain all day long. Our surveys at Values Coach, we do a culture assessment survey, and I'll get to this a little bit more later. And it has typically 12 to 15 questions. And one question I always ask is this one. And it's on a 5-point scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And it says, our people reflect positive attitudes, treat others with respect, and do not bitch, moan, whine, complain, gossip, and point fingers. And as you can see, more people disagree with that statement than agree with it, especially when you count the unsure, which to me is disagree. And less than 6% strongly agree. This is more than 6,000. We're now up over 7,000 responses from 20 different hospitals and healthcare professional associations. And what I've been saying in my presentations recently is that this is the healthcare crisis. If we had 95% of people who work in hospitals and long-term care and outpatient facilities strongly agreeing, yes, we do have positive attitudes and we do treat people with respect and we don't engage in toxic emotional negativity, every other problem we have, we would deal with just fine. We would not have a healthcare crisis. The good news is that is something on the inside, and the only thing preventing us from dealing with that healthcare crisis on the inside is having the courage to do it. The bad news is it takes a lot of courage and it's hard work. As you know, most of you, those highly engaged employees we call spark plugs because that's what they do. They bring a spark to the organization and the people around them. And then you have the zombies, another day, another dollar. That's their attitude. Work sucks, then you die. And then you have the emotional vampires, the people who literally suck the life out of an organization and the people around them. Disengagement affects everything in your organization in a negative way. quality of service declines, performance declines, productivity declines, safety declines. It's been shown in study after study that disengaged employees are far more likely to cause an accident, far more likely to cause a patient mishap, far more likely to give the wrong medication or whatever other problems can arise. Your community image suffers when people are just going through the motions and they're not engaged in their organization. Jim Clifton is the CEO of the Gallup organization, and in his book, a very disconcerting book, The Coming Jobs War, he wrote, disengaged people, especially if they're managers, are a quality defect. Just like giving a patient the wrong medication, just like shipping the wrong product out to a customer, it is a quality defect when you have people who are not engaged in their work. And Gallup has actually calculated what is the cost of disengagement to our economy. We do the same thing with our clients. We help them estimate how much money are you spending on disengaged, non-productive activities in your organization. And here's what Gallup estimates disengagement costs our economy every year. And every time I show this slide, $500 billion, $500 billion a year, that baby's reaction is exactly the reaction I get from my audience. And every time I show the CEO and CFO of a client organization, this is what disengagement and toxic emotional negativity is costing your organization. That's the sort of reaction I get from them as well. And I always point out in my presentations, the real losers in disengagement are the disengaged people themselves. Edward Hallowell, one of the leading psychiatrists in the country, calls it one of the leading causes of people not achieving their personal goals and of depression. In a book I've recently read, Younger Next Year, the authors, a physician and a journalist, say that the emotional message that you send to yourself by not being engaged tells your body, tells your mind, you're getting old, you get depressed. And on the other hand, when you become engaged in what they call the great hunt of life, you can actually override that default message. And one of the key ways to, as they put it, get younger next year is to get engaged in your work. And so when you promote a culture of engagement, when you promote a culture of ownership, you are actually doing your colleagues a big favor. Not just at work, but at home. You're helping them to be happier. You're helping them to be younger. You're helping them to be healthier. They're going to live longer, and they're going to get a lot more done. And here's a key point. Whether somebody is engaged or not is a choice. There is no engagement gene. The organization cannot force you to be disengaged or to be engaged. These are choices you make. I recently went through a toll booth in Chicago, crowded toll booth. And the lady at the toll booth was singing and dancing. And she said, "I'm having a blessed day. I hope you are too." She has made a choice. What many people think of as a menial, low-paid job, she has decided is a blessing. And she shares that blessing with everybody who goes through her toll booth. And so a quick review of invisible architecture. And you know, we always say it's more important than the bricks and the mortar. And if I've been to your organization, you've heard me tell stories about it. We call it the blueprint behind the blueprint. And it's the soul of your organization in the same way the bricks and mortar are the body. And as we describe in the workbook, we use a construction metaphor. And in that metaphor, the foundation is core values, the superstructure is corporate culture, and the interior finish is attitude in the workplace. And let's do a quick review of that. Foundation of core values define what you stand for, what you won't stand for, and most important, should define who you are. And I've shared this with people. My very favorite core value in the whole world, a high-tech company here in Iowa, our home state, they have 8 core values, one of which is be yourself unless you're a jerk. And I share this for a couple reasons. One, in 6 words, they define who they are, who they want you to be. They define what they stand for, treating people with respect, being a team player, and what they won't stand for, being a jerk. They also do it in a way that is obviously not boilerplate. It's not boring. It's not just a plaque on the wall. This is something that employees can really embrace. And Wouldn't you be proud to go home and tell your kid that you work at a place where one of their core values is to be authentic, to be yourself, but to never be a jerk? The opposite end of the spectrum, a high-tech company in the Silicon Valley, their CEO wrote a book called No Excuses Management, and they have 8 core values. One of them is we are about winning and we do not tolerate losing. And we make our numbers with no excuses and we never get any returns because we never make mistakes. Now, these guys never make hiring mistakes, to be sure, because who would want to go to work at a company called the Marine Corps of Silicon Valley where they don't tolerate losers if they didn't think they had the mental toughness and the inner strength to compete, to work in that environment? And something that we emphasize in the workbook is this: the values, behaviors, outcomes continuum. When you're thinking about the core values of an organization or of yourself personally, this is really important. And I'll give you an example. I often have people look at our course on the 12 core action values and tell me, Joe, you left out something. You left out trust. And what I tell them is, yeah, trust is really important, but trust is not a value. It is an outcome that you value. And trust is earned by certain behaviors, including honesty, reliability. In our course, and in my opinion, humility is one of them. And the value that motivates people to be honest, to be reliable, to be humble is integrity. And when you think about it, many values in a corporate statement of values or a hospital statement of values, things like excellence, quality, safety, stewardship, professionalism, those things are behaviors, professionalism, they're outcomes, quality or safety. And the challenge is to define what are the underlying core values that will inspire people to behave in a way that earns you that outcome. And one other thing that we emphasize in the workbook and when we work with our clients is the interaction of personal and organizational values. Personal values are a deeply held philosophy that helps you guide how you think, how you set your goals, how you choose your priorities, how you make decisions, especially under uncertainty, the way you manage your relationships, how you deal with conflict. The more clear you are about what your values are, the better you're going to do at all of those things. Organizational values, on the other hand, determine how an organization functions, how they select, train, and keep good people, how they treat their customers, how they treat each other, how they manage, or in some cases don't manage, their resources, and how they serve their communities. And here's the deal. As Kouzes and Posner, the guys who wrote the book, The Leadership Challenge, write in another one of their books, their research shows that people who are most clear about what their personal vision and their personal values are going to be much more likely to be committed to the values and the vision of their organization. And that's why we teach the course on the 12 core action values. That is one way of challenging people to think about and act upon their personal values. This is a picture taken at Midland Memorial Hospital in West Texas, where they really have taken the 12 core action values and a culture of ownership to heart. In fact, they call their training room the Culture of Ownership Training Room, and it is decorated. They had a professional artist do this. That's one corner that has the 12 core action values at each corner. On another wall, they have the Self-Empowerment Pledge. They have the Pickle Pledge. They have their organizational core values. There's a key lesson here, and that is when you work on creating a culture of ownership, when you work on promoting values, both organization and personal values, make it visible. Keep it in front of people in a visible, tangible way as much as you can. One more thing. This is not an absolute clear line, but by and large, your organizational values, quality, profitability, will define the strategies that you use, but it's personal values, like in our course, authenticity, courage, perseverance, purpose, that will define the culture of your organization. And those two things really need to work together. Now, on that foundation of values, and we're going to spend more time on this one and go through some of the tools, is culture. Culture, I think of as the personality or the character of the organization. And every organization has a culture. Very often those cultures have evolved haphazardly, without a plan, without a blueprint. And in many organizations, you don't just have a culture, you have a patchwork of cultures. You have, in a hospital, you might have the med-surg culture, the ER culture, the food service, the pharmacy culture, the day shift, night shift, weekend culture. And the question is, to what extent do you feel cultural standards or pillars across the organization, or is it just like a haphazard patchwork where there is no consistency between them? And so one of the tools that we share, it's a very simple culture assessment. And if you read the book, The Florence Prescription, you know it defines 8 essential characteristics of a culture of ownership: commitment, engagement, passion, initiative, stewardship, fellowship, belonging, and pride. And what this survey does, and you go to it on your cell phone, your smartphone with the QR code there, or you can type in that inelegant website, or you can wait until you get the slides and just actually click on that button and it will take you there. But what that survey will do is ask you to rate on a 3-point scale for each of the 8 questions how your organization does on commitment, on engagement, on passion, on pride. And then based on that score, it will give you an assessment. And the other one that we do with our clients, and we'll be happy to do with anybody who's on this call, is we have a 12 to 15 question culture assessment survey that we do. And I mentioned earlier the question on attitudes and respectful behavior within the organization and how that is the real healthcare crisis. If you go to this link, you can see a sample of what that survey looks like. And if we haven't done it for you, we'd be happy to do it as part of this webinar. If we've done it for you, but you want to do a recheck and see have we made any progress, we're also happy to do that for you. Now, culture, some of you have heard this, but culture really is the ultimate competitive differentiator. And my favorite example, one of several favorite examples, is Costco and Walmart. They're in the same business. They recruit the same kind of people, sell the same kind of products, but the experience of working for Costco versus Walmart simply couldn't be any more different. And when Business Week ran a cover story on Costco, they wrote about ecstatic employees. I have never heard Walmart accused of having ecstatic employees. And people shop at Walmart because they don't have to dress up like they do at the dollar store. If you've been to Walmart recently, you know what I'm talking about. Whereas at Costco, people have to buy a membership just to get in the front door. So a couple of exercises from the workbook that I'd like to review. One is on page 109, 110, is creating a culture quilt. And this is what it looks like. This is the blank form. And you can download this form from the Cultural Blueprinting website. And what you start with on the outside, what are the essential pillars of your culture? And then on the inside, you write about what are the characteristics. So in this example, an entrepreneurial company, and their core pillars are 3 things. They're going to be entrepreneurial. They're going to be willing to take risks. They're going to be resilient in the face of every adversity. But affection is going to characterize their relationships. And then on the inside, you see what are some of the ways that you would see those things reflected within their organization. So at Ryerson University in Toronto, they took this to heart, and in small groups, they worked out their own culture quilts, and this was one of them. I love Ryerson Family, abbreviated to RAMLY. This was another, and their key theme here was unity, and then around the outside, what are the things that contribute to that? And then another one. And as they went through these, they had each group put theirs up on the wall, and they were able to, through an iterative process, do a great job of defining what they want their culture to be. Another exercise, this one I always do in leadership retreats. It's a lot of fun. Define your culture, describe your culture in just 6 words, not 5, not 7. It's got to be 6. So it's like a haiku or like writing a sonnet. There's a specific format. I stole the idea from Smith Magazine and their book on 6-word memoirs. And they've asked people to write their whole life story in just 6 words. And the subtitle of their book, Not Quite What I Was Planning. My favorite one, a 9-year-old little girl with cancer, says, cursed with cancer, blessed with friends. Oh, and by the way, that brings up a really important point, doesn't it? No matter what you're complaining about, if a 9-year-old kid with terminal cancer can write this, what can happen to you or me that instead of whining and complaining, we can't find a blessing, find a constructive suggestion, take the pickle pledge to heart? And here's a guy who has made millions with 6 words. You might be a redneck if your bicycle has a gun rack, your house has wheels, and your car doesn't. So this exercise seems easy, but it's not. It is very thought-provoking. It is very challenging. What you usually see when we do this in groups is people come up with either a boilerplate list, 6 words, or they come up with a sales pitch, a slogan, an advertising jingle. It's really hard to tell a story in 6 words. And before I give examples of some people who have, let me share with you a real example. This is from managers sitting in the same room at a big academic medical center leadership retreat. We love patients and each other. No, that's pretty good, isn't it? We are always here for you, especially when we take off the rose-colored glasses. Multiple priorities, limited resources, great expectations. We're entitled, hating it, and staying. Disjointed departments working against each other. By the way, when I start getting to this point in live presentations, you start to see people in the audience nodding in recognition. Negativity reigns while circling the drain. Meetings will continue until morale improves. And it raises the question, how can managers in the same organization have such a different perspective on what their culture is? And the answer is, it's like the blind man and the elephant. Somebody working in pharmacy versus lab versus nursing, day shift, night shift. They have totally different perspectives on what the culture is. And in a great organization like Southwest Airlines, you don't see that. Southwest, these are their core values, and in 6 words, it defines who they are, what they stand for, and what they won't stand for. If you count the hyphen, servant's heart, warrior spirit, fun-loving attitude defines the culture of Southwest Airlines. The one I mentioned earlier, Cypress Semiconductor, where the CEO wrote the book No Excuses Management, 6 words, the Marine Corps of Silicon Valley. And in those 6 words, anybody can get a pretty good feel of what it would feel like to work there. We worked with a small entrepreneurial corporation, and they came up with this: we're tough, we're focused, we win. I was so impressed with that, I've adopted it as a personal mantra. So when I sit down to write, I say, I'm tough. It's really not true. If you know me, you know that's not true. I'm focused. And if you know me, you know how even much more untrue that is. But here's the deal. If I can do those 2 things, if I can be tough with myself and say, for the next 2 hours, I'm going to write. I'm not going to go goof off. I'm focused. I'm going to turn off the email. I'm not going to answer my cell phone. If I do those 2 things, then I'll win by getting my writing done. And so in that sense, a great 6-word description is not just a description, it becomes a prescription, doesn't it? This is what we expect you to do. So at Values Coach, we have put a lot of thought into what does it take to make a great culture in healthcare, or in any other organization for that matter. And it's really the 3 things in the Florence Challenge. People are emotionally positive, people are self-empowered, and they're fully engaged. And that's what we have been telling people makes a great culture. And if you go to this website, theflorencechallenge.com, click on the tab that says resources, you can actually download this certificate of commitment. And what we're seeing all across the country, and these pictures are Texas, South Carolina, Idaho, and Maine, but many other states, we're seeing people who are actually signing it, and in some cases putting their picture next to the signature and posting it in a place where people can see it. And that's a way that they can hold themselves and each other to a higher standard of personal expectations, of values, of attitude and behavior in the workplace. And one more, and this is the one that I think people struggle with the most because it's the most complicated to do. It is also the one that potentially has the greatest possibility of having a positive impact on your organization. And that is the culture mapping schematic. And on page 103 of the workbook, you will see this diagram. And what this does is it helps you define specific tactics to promote a culture of ownership. And let's go through this. The very inner wheel, I'm assuming that your goal is to have a culture of ownership. And so the next ring out is, well, why would you want to have such a culture? What are the benefits? And you would be more productive. You would have better relationships. People would be more resilient, etc. So the next ring is, what are the essential characteristics? What does it look like? And these are the characteristics of a culture of ownership that I described in the book, The Florence Prescription. And then the outer ring is, what are the strategies that can help you promote that kind of culture? And these are the 8 strategies that I defined in the book, All Hands on Deck, that were implemented by companies like Hewlett-Packard, Mary Kay Ash, IBM, or Ford, especially in their early days when they really did have a great culture. Now, there is no right or wrong. There's no cookie cutter answer to how you work your way through that. And in fact, I actually calculated there are 644 possible pathways through that diagram. And the challenge is that it focuses you like the tumblers on a bank vault. Getting them lined up in a certain direction will focus your energy, your attention, your priorities on one tactic that will help you change your culture. And so let's say, for example, you're having a problem with turnover and you're losing good people. So what you want to work on is loyalty. Now, anything in the next ring, the ring that says what, will help you do that. But you're going to pick one. And so you say, you know, if our people would take greater pride in our organization, like they do in their high school or college football team, they'd be much more likely to stay and not leave to make a little more money elsewhere. And again, if you go to the far out ring where it says how, any one of those strategies will help you promote pride. What this schematic does is it forces you to choose one. So we, being values coach, would say, well, if you could get people to connect their personal values as reflected in the courses we teach with the organization's values, they would be more proud of their organization and more likely to be loyal. And so there's an invisible outer ring beyond how it's the specific tactic. And in our case, we might say, well, if you would share the 12 core action values with your people, like I know some of the people on this call have already done, that would help them connect those personal values with the organization's values, help them be more proud of their organization, help them have a higher degree of loyalty. Now, this can also be a interesting diagnostic tool, and I'll give you an example. We worked with an organization, very large multi-hospital system that had a pretty significant culture challenge. And in a leadership retreat with maybe 300 people, and we had about 30 round tables or so with 10 people at each table, I gave each table a copy of this thing to work on, and had each table have one person stand up and tell us what was your pathway through the culture mapping schematic wheel. And of the 30 tables, 28 had started on the inside with relationships, and more than 20 had cultivate trust on the outside. Now, in the what ring in the middle, there were a lot of different answers. But if the only thing I knew about this organization is about 90% of people think the most important why in the center is relationships, and more than 70% think the most important how on the outer ring is cultivate trust, I can tell you this is an organization with a problematic culture that has a lot of problems because people don't trust each other, and that creates bad relationships. So just going through this process can help you diagnose your current culture and then prescribe what do you have to do to create the kind of culture that you want to have. And all of you got, when you get the Cultural Blueprinting Toolkit package, one of the things you get is a culture mapping schematic wheel that you can actually use. And I want to point out that this is still a prototype. The one you have is the next generation from what you see here, so it's a little better. I would love to hear from you. How are you using it? Is it being helpful? Because our next step will be actually going to a game company, like the people who make Monopoly games or something, and having it produced at a higher level of quality, but I don't want to do that if it's really not that helpful. So culture, this is maybe the most important insight that I've had in 20 years with Values Coach. We keep talking about changing culture, cultural transformation. Culture does not change unless and until people change. If people never change their mindset, you're going to get the same old results, because culture is the personality, it's the character of the organization. It is also the collective self-talk, self-image, self-esteem, self-belief of the people who work there. It is the collective of the attitudes and the behaviors of the people who work there. And if those things don't change, then culture never changes. And I want to wrap up with talking about the interior finish of attitude in the workplace. I took this picture at the Atlanta airport about a month ago. It's a Southwest Airlines advertisement on both sides of the door to the little train there. And on one side is a picture of a happy, smiling employee, and on the other it says, all airline employees have attitudes, ours just have the good kind. And it raises a really good question. If I pulled into your community, or if one of your employees pulled into your community and saw a billboard, all hospital employees have attitudes, ours just have the good kind, what would their response be? Would they say, oh yeah, I'm really proud to be a part of that place? Or would they say, roll their eyes and say, yeah, right? And a positive workplace begins, just like a healthy workplace begins with eradicating toxic cigarette smoke, a positive workplace culture begins with you becoming more intolerant for toxic emotional negativity. Over time, the climate in your organization is defined by what you expect and what you tolerate, and what you tolerate will dominate what you say you expect. I think this is one of the most important passages in the book, The Florence Prescription. One toxic negative person can drag down morale and productivity of an entire work unit, of an entire department, the way one person lighting a cigarette instantly pollutes every lung in the place. And it is our responsibility as leaders to create the kind of a workplace where that sort of toxic emotional negativity is simply not tolerated. Now, the American Nurses Association a couple months ago came out with a position statement on incivility, bullying, and workplace violence. Now, I take my hat off to the ANA for having the courage and the vision to come out with this statement, but it is an absolute travesty that in our world they feel compelled to have to do that. In hospitals, in long-term care facilities, in ambulatory facilities, any place where we are obligated to take care of people's health and welfare, we should have absolutely zero tolerance for incivility, bullying, and workplace violence. And that gets me to the tool that I think has maybe the greatest potential for many, maybe most organizations from the workbook. And many of you, we've done this in some way or another, and that is the Pickle Challenge. It is a very simple promise that will change your life, and it will change your organization if enough people take it. And it simply says, I will turn every complaint into a blessing or a constructive suggestion. And there's a footnote that says, by taking this pledge, I'm promising myself that I'm not going to waste my time, my energy on toxic and emotional negativity, nor will I ever engage with other people who are doing it themselves. And we call it the Pickle Pledge because people who are always whining and complaining look like they've been sucking on a dill pickle. This Pickle Pledge, this Pickle Challenge is literally taken on a life of its own. And I know some of the people on this call have seen it happen in their places. We are seeing singing pickles, dancing pickles, hula pickles, pickle piñatas, people going around with pickle pops. We are seeing people declare their workspace a pickle-free zone, the way we used to have to declare our workspace a smoke-free zone. I don't want to hear your complaining, criticizing, gossiping. Take it to your shrink. He gets paid to hear it. I don't. This is Kalispell Regional Healthcare. Their home healthcare department turned the entire building into a pickle-free zone, and they had a professional artist put together this beautiful artwork. This is the HR department at Midland Memorial Hospital, where they've declared the entire hospital to be a pickle-free zone. And the first thing anybody sees going in for a new employee orientation to apply for a job and coming down to file a grievance is they see that the hospital has taken the pickle pledge, and below you can see the promises of the self-empowerment pledge. And then if you look on the far upper right-hand corner, every employee in the HR department has signed the Florence Challenge Certificate of Commitment. When I started working with Midland Health and Midland Memorial Hospital, the general perception of their HR department, it was personnel, and it was the people who you went to with a problem, the people who said no. A couple years later, it really is seen now as a human resources, not just personnel department, and it's seen as part of the organization that is doing the most to help promote a positive culture of ownership. This is a log. This is a 2,000-pound log that somebody at Midland Memorial Hospital cut off a tree that had been knocked down during a storm, and this is what it looks like today. That 2,000-pound log is now the big pickle proclaiming no sour attitudes in our organization. That's Bob Dent, the Chief Operating Officer, and that is the first thing that most employees see when they walk into the employee entrance of the hospital, is that this hospital is a pickle-free zone. We are seeing people having pickle cake decorating contests, pickle cupcake eating contests. This is Grinnell Regional Medical Center, where in the patient accounting department, right opposite when you come around the corner to their department, you see the pickle pledge with Penelope Pickle there. Now tell me, what do most people going to patient accounting have on their minds? Are they going to compliment the hospital on what a great job the doctors and the nurses and the therapists did? Or are they going with a complaint of some sort? And you know what this sign does is that people still have their complaint, but having seen that on the way around the corner to the window where they're going to talk to a live human being, it has made their conversations much more pleasant. Just that simple reminder. We are seeing people having pickle jar decorating contests. This is community hospitals and wellness centers in Ohio, where they had some of the most creative pickle jars I have ever seen. That hairy character with the walker, that is a persnickety pickle. And every time somebody bitches, moans, whines, complains, they're supposed to put a quarter in that pickle jar. We are seeing people take the pickle challenge for charity, which is where we challenge an organization to raise a certain amount of money in quarters by catching themselves whining and complaining. And if they hit a certain target and donate the money to a charity, then we'll match it. This is a picture at Star Valley Medical Center in Wyoming, beautiful Afton, Wyoming. They took the pickle challenge a couple years ago. And here you see everyone, not every employee, but a lot of them, gathering together as a group to do the pickle pledge, and then to flip their card over and do that day's promise from the self-empowerment pledge. I was back there recently, and now as you see from the banner up above, Star Valley has been designated by the National Rural Health Association as one of America's top 100 hospitals 5 years running, and last year they were in the top 20. And it's not just because of patient care excellence and financial performance, it's because they have a great culture. And they really do. So I was back there a few months ago, and I reissued that challenge. And I said, if you can raise a certain amount of money in a week, donate the money to an appropriate charity, then again, we'll match it. They took the challenge to heart. Guess what? They hit the target. And think about this. This is a hospital that has already done the pickle challenge. It is already a part of their culture. They have trainers doing the 12 Core Action Values course. They're one of America's top critical access hospitals. And yet when they really pay attention, they can still catch themselves complaining more than they want to be. And if they can do that at a positive, outstanding place like Star Valley Medical Center, anybody can benefit from doing that more. One caveat, you will get the most vociferous, vigorous resistance to the pickle challenge from the people who most need it. And that's why you've got to have the courage to stay with it. You have to have the courage to say, we're going to do this. Do it in a lighthearted way. Do it in a fun way. But the real beneficiaries will be the most negative people if they can make a change. And even more so will be their families at home. I got an email from the CEO of a hospital in Nebraska. And several years after they took the Florence Challenge to heart, he said, I got a whole new team and I didn't have to change the people because they changed themselves. And you can feel it when you walk through that hospital, when you walk through hospitals that have really taken the Florence Challenge to heart, that have really worked hard to build a culture of ownership, that have thought through what would our invisible architecture look like if we were the place we really wanted to be. You can see it, you can feel it. A couple of months ago, we had at Midland Memorial Hospital, we had a groundbreaking ceremony for their invisible architecture. And we had hundreds of people and media out in the courtyard. And I made the comment when it was my turn to say, this was the first time I've ever been at a groundbreaking ceremony for something that you can't see. And the hospital's chief financial officer piped in and he said, oh, you can see it and you can feel it. The change in this place is that palpable. And that's what happens when you really get serious about your invisible architecture, when you really do the work to create a blueprint, a cultural blueprint for a culture of ownership. You can see it, you can feel it. So I want to wrap up before we turn it over for questions with another important passage from the book that I know many of you have heard. If we each do our part, we can change our lives for the better. And we've seen it over and over. In fact, if you pick up the brand new book, it's Chicken Soup for the Nurse's Soul, Inspiration for Nurses by Leanne Thiemann and a co-author. One of the 101 stories in that book is a story about a registered nurse at Midland Memorial Hospital who took to heart the Self-Empowerment Pledge and the Pickle Challenge, both tools that are described in the workbook. He took it to heart and he was able to break a long-standing drug addiction by holding himself accountable, by being empowered. And the word he used to describe the change was miracle. And if we all do our parts, we can change our organizations for the better. And again, I've seen it over and over. Places like Midland Memorial Hospital, where at the beginning of 2014, they were hitting record low patient satisfaction, even though they had just opened one of the most beautiful hospital facilities I've ever seen. And a year later, they're breaking records for record high patient satisfaction because you can see and feel the difference in their culture. And if enough of us do our parts, we can change our world for the better. If enough of us could create a culture of ownership, if enough of us could become intolerant of the toxic emotional negativity in our organizations, the healthcare crisis, the economic crisis would not be so overwhelming. So at this point, let me stop for a minute and ask if you have any questions. Either send an email to me, it's simple, joe@joetie.com, or better yet, type it into the chat box, which I think you can see at the bottom. Or give us a call. Michelle and Sally are out there and can answer calls, but I see on the phone that all the lines are busy right now. So as I'm waiting, let me answer a couple of the questions that have come up in advance of this. And one of the questions, one of the most disconcerting questions, and I hear it way too often, is, I really want to be a positive contributor to a culture of ownership, but the most negative person in my area is my boss, is my manager. How do I deal with that? And I would be very open to any responses to anybody else out there who's got a better answer. My answer to that initially is that there's nothing you can do to change somebody else's attitude except through your own example and through having the courage to say something like, do you hear what you're saying? Or, whoops, put a quarter in the pickle jar. I happened to be at Midland Memorial Hospital a year ago when their accreditation surveyors came through, and the Pickle Challenge was running at full steam at the time. All three of the surveyors, the nurse, the physician, and the administrator, commented on how much more positive the culture was, commented on the pickle jars they'd been seeing all around the hospital. And the nurse surveyor said this: the highlight of my entire week was when I heard a nurse say to a physician, "Doc, you're being a pickle, put a quarter in the jar." And he did. And you know, it's that level of courage. Do it in a lighthearted, fun way, but it takes courage to tell somebody, take the pickle out of your mouth. Be part of the solution. Stop being part of the problem. So as I'm waiting for other questions to come in, here's another one from obviously a hospital facility. We want to do something during Nurses Week. What do you recommend? And let me say something about that. And this applies to Nurses Week or any other week. One of the things that you see too often in hospital settings is a silo effect. And unfortunately, I'm hearing more of this in hospitals, that nursing is somehow separate, that people say, well, nurses get all the attention, or nurses get the awards, or whatever. And I think anything you can do to send a message that this is not just nursing, we're all responsible for the patient experience, whether you work in the lab and you have to get your diagnosis correct, work in housekeeping, and you have daily opportunities to interact with our patients and our visitors on top of keeping their space clean. Every one of us is a part of the patient care team, and we need to remember that. And anything you can do to bring down the real or perceived silo walls is a good thing. At Grinnell Regional Medical Center, their values trainers have been meeting and talking about what are ideas to create a more positive culture. And one that I absolutely love, somebody said, what if every single person with every patient or visitor interaction would promote the next people that patient is going to see? So for example, someone says, can you tell me where radiology is? You say, yeah, I'll walk you down there. And as you're walking down, say, you know, you're going to love being in our radiology department. Those people are so nice, and you know, we have some of the best people in the state working down there. If every employee would have that sort of respect to promote the people that they're working with, think how different the organization could be, how much better it could be, and how much more effectively we would bring down the silo walls. So let's wrap up this call. Our time is pretty much up anyway. And I will be sending out a copy of these slides very quickly. And as soon as we get the recording back from GoToWebinar, I will be sending out the recording to everybody. If you have any questions, comments, or requests for additional information, just let either Michelle or Sally or me know at the Values Coach office, and we will take care of it as quickly as possible. I want to thank all of you very much for dialing in. And even more so, I want to thank you for what you're doing to promote a culture of ownership where you work. And I will see you on the next call. Thank you.